they created these NFTs and people didn't really think anything of it, and they thought it was just like a fun fucking project or whatever. These guys end up getting like a $5 billion valuation for their company. This is where this gets really weird, because people started noticing things and they started looking into things, and they just kept going further and further and further and further and further down the rabbit hole. So these were some of the things that were pointed out that I feel like are worth mentioning. So for one, the logo, one of the logos is like a black background. It's a circle. It's a black jagged circle, right? And then it has like an ape skull in the middle of it, and it says Bored Ape Yacht Club. So you don't really think anything of it, right? But it actually is similar to one of the logos from Germany in World War II, and it has 18 teeth in it. It's like literally you could go and look this up online. It's GordonGonner.com. Gordon Gonner is one of the co-founders of Bored Ape Yacht Club. One of the guys that's kind of spoken out in opposition is Rebel Rider, or I think his name is, or something like that. And he basically said that he bought the domain GordonGonner.com so he would rank higher in the search results. So if you look up Bored Ape Yacht Club Gordon Gonner, it's like the top search result on Google, which is hilarious. And it's just him pointing out all these things with the project, right? So the 18 teeth, 18 is it means, the leader of Germany during World War II. We won't say his name for monetization purposes and for the sake of not getting flagged. So yeah, that's what that means. And in the logo, really in the skull of the logo that the Bored Ape Yacht Club is based on, it also has 18 teeth. Makes sense, The next thing that happens is like in one of the clues. So then they created this like elaborate project, right? Where they're like, if you solve all the puzzles, you win a Bored Ape, which is worth obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars. You win a cash prize as well. You win all this other shit, right? So one of the clues that they picked of all the chimps, and you're talking about lower hominids, and you're talking about primates. So you're talking about the genus of like potentially hundreds of different variations of chimps that have existed, or apes that have existed, and lower hominids. The one that they choose is Australopithecus. And that one in particular, if you even look up who found the Australopithecus, it of course was someone related to the aforementioned regime, a scientist. So that was like the second main thing. The third thing is that the project itself, which, God, I'm not sure if you knew about this, but the project itself went live on the anniversary of the death of the the specific leader of Germany during World War II. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did know that. That the project was, it happened on this specific date. I have a couple of thoughts on this project, and I'm just going to present the antithesis of this argument. Some people might say it's racist. It supports a
Oh, I have a couple more points I wanted to get to.
Oh, okay, make the points.
All right. All right. It was a rhetorical question. Sorry. But then there was another. Yeah, this is like a pretty uncomfortable topic. But I'm trying to dance around this as best as I can without getting into trouble here. But then another one of the co-founders, he goes by this name Gargamel. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember this from when you were a kid, but like, you ever see the Smurfs, the character Gargamel? It's been like kind of acknowledged that it's a very anti-Semitic depiction of like a Jewish person, and that's like his name. That's what the guy goes by, Gargamel. Gargamel was in college for an undergrad thesis. He wrote about like this particular faction, like a fictional work about them. Then the other thing is that Yugo Labs, the company that created Bored Ape, they said they were inspired by the hash marks, and the company that owns the hash marks goes by a name that was a phrase used, and it was written on the gates of like one of these camps, we'll call it. And then another member goes by the name of SAS, which is SASS, which some believe is an abbreviation for the two divisions of this faction. And then the company that owns Bored Ape is called Yuga Labs, and a common 4chan expression is surfing the Kali Yuga, which means embracing your role as the bad guy, specifically associated with this faction. Another co-founder says he likes Lovecraftian stories in an interview, and Lovecraft was a known person who subscribed to this ideology. And then I guess one of the last points, which is more of a stretch, is that the Bored Ape 1488 has connotations to that. On his jumpsuit, it says 19087. And in cryptography, you're supposed to remove zero. So if you remove the zero, it says 1987, which is like the last year that this guy, who was like the last leader of this faction, died, and he was like the second in command. So, and he died in a prison, so he was wearing an orange jumpsuit, obviously. But those are some of the main points that I felt were necessary to mention. But this whole thing kind of, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I think people should watch this. I think, who was it, philion or someone put it out. And it was pretty interesting to read about and to see. I just kind of look at it from the perspective of like, how many coincidences does something have to have before it becomes like, you're like, okay, this is getting weird now, you know? So that's kind of how I look at it. I don't think I could look at any other piece of work or something else and point to that, you know, and say like, oh, there are 10 coincidences or like 5 coincidences that point to this thing being associated or created with this thing in mind, you know? It's very weird.
Right. The additive effect of a whole bunch of coincidences does, or the additive effect of a whole bunch of circumstantial evidence does have some merit. But the question you have to ask in this whole situation is, right, let's accept the premise that the artwork is racist and the artwork supports the philosophies of Germany during the time of World War II, right? Let's just accept the premise, even though it's circumstantial evidence and it's not proven, and the founders of the project did deny these accusations, right? Let's accept that premise through because we have all this circumstantial evidence. The question you have to ask yourself is, right, does artwork have to depict something that you support, or that the founder supports or is in favor of? Or can I make a picture or a painting or a piece of artwork of the devil? Can I make a picture of Bernie Madoff, who I don't support his actions? And I know I'm not comparing these people. These people obviously did not nearly as bad as things. What these pictures are depicting are much worse. I'm not comparing them directly. I'm just giving you this I'm giving you this kind of comparison, as say I'm not comparing them, but I'm kind of am comparing them to basically take the emotion out of it, because you take it when you look at the and when you look at something that's totally at the end of a spectrum, or that's totally extreme, there tends to be a lot of emotion involved. So can I make a picture of, or can I draw a piece of artwork of, let's say, the devil, who's basically somebody I don't support, I don't agree with, and say it's just a piece of artwork, and it's basically telling history, or it's telling the history of like creation and history of founding, and telling the story of like the archangel Gabriel and such? Can I draw the picture of him even though I don't support the actions of the devil?
Yeah, so my rebuttal is obviously you can. No one's really disputing that. But I think the main problem is that it's intellectually dishonest to lead people into potentially buying something or supporting a project where they don't know that that is the unintended, like there's sort of this unintended consequence of like, you're buying into something, you like what they're doing, but you don't understand the undertones or like the lesser known hidden meanings behind things. And I think that's a big problem with symbolism, and particularly certain imagery, is that a lot of people, if you're not really like a history buff or you're not into that sort of thing, you're not going to know too much about it. So in a way, it's like is very intellectually dishonest, regardless of the intent of the artist. It's like it's like if there was something with baseball, and I reference like pitching a no hitter, but you don't know anything about baseball and you think it's cool, but like you wouldn't know anything about pitching a no hitter if you're not like privy to baseball terms, or like or like an infield shift or like an outfield shift. Like you wouldn't really know anything about that unless you knew about the intricacies of baseball. So like you could buy a baseball painting, but if it's depicting like an infield shift and you don't really know anything about that, but I might know stuff about that because I know more about baseball or I understand the concept of that. That painting or whatever that art might have more value to me than you because you're just like a normie in that like sort of culture like that around the painting or whatever the case may be. So in what I'm saying is like in the case of the point that you were making is that you're talking about something depicting Bernie Madoff or the devil or whatever the case may be, like some type of antagonistic figure. In that case, it would be at the forefront, right? Like it wouldn't be something that's like tucked away or in this case, like hidden sort of imagery that most people wouldn't understand or like pick up on. But these are instances where, these things aren't very prevalent. And if they were, I'm certain that people would make a point to talk about it. And it wouldn't, the controversy, when you think about it, it wouldn't be a thing because if it was at the forefront, people would already know about it. And what would there be to talk about, right? In your case, where you're talking about imagery of the devil or Bernie Madoff, you mentioned, like that's at the forefront, right? So like if you have a picture of the devil, everyone that has a brain could go, oh, that's the devil, or like, oh, that's Bernie Madoff, and like they know about it. But in the case of this, the hidden imagery is why there is a controversy to begin with, because people were led to believe that it was just a bunch of pictures of apes that are NFTs, and like that's it, like randomly generated apes. But it doesn't look like that's the case.
Right. I get what you're saying, but here's my counterpoint to that, right? Um, Before, at the start of this argument, you presented all these facts about, these soldiers, these different groups, these hats, these symbolism and such. I bet before this project, you didn't know the history of this symbolism and you didn't know this. So would you say by basically creating this public outrage and creating this sort of like by hiding the symbolism and causing this public outrage, and that the fact that hate draws controversy, and the fact that by having a project of this magnitude and this scale, you're basically reaching more people and teaching them about the history of Germany and the history of what happened during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say. Like, there's that whole educational aspect of it where people are learning about it. But I like the
Oh,
fact that I like the fact that I learned about it because now I know to kind of look at things through a different scope. Like these are things that I guess you would say are kind of, fall within the scope of naivete, at least for me, because I'm not really too privy about a lot of this stuff. I mean, I only really know like what I've seen on History Channel or like what I read in books or whatever,
right,
or
right,
what
right.
I've like read in my own
That's
research. So I guess in my take, I would say that now I know what these things mean, and now I know that if there's anything else going on, whether that be movies or any type of media or art or whatever the case may be, now I know to kind of look for this stuff and to avoid it because I don't. It's
right.
not necessarily anything that I subscribe to or agree with. So
Right, that's totally understandable that you didn't know about the symbolism beforehand. I don't think a lot of people knew about the history and the symbolism beforehand. Now, if someone was smart enough to create this artwork and hide all the symbolism in a piece of artwork, don't you think that they could have basically had the intelligence or the fortitude to know that it would eventually be solved, and that the masses would eventually learn about the history of this, and they would learn about what happened during this time? And don't you think that basically the founders of this artwork could be doing that on purpose to basically teach somebody about history? Because we all know a lot of people aren't reading books, or a lot of people aren't learning through traditional means, and by creating this piece of artwork, you're reaching a younger demographic and teaching them about a topic that they might not understand or they might not know. So it's like a different way to reach people.
I think that's a very valid point, but one of the main things that I brought up was that term surfing the Kali Yuga. That term specifically is thrown around quite a bit on 4chan, and it's a very negative term. So, in that sense, you know, it suggests at least
What
that
what does that term mean? Surfing the cow.
it's sort of just the rough translation of it just means like embracing your role as the bad guy, but more specifically in the scope of the faction we're referring to. Um, so in that sense, like that term, and for them to use the word Yuga like that, and then to cite that they were fans of one project, the hash marks and the creators of the hash marks used that company is named after a quote that was written at one of these camps on a wall, and also is like a common trope from this specific organization that doesn't exist anymore. um, I think that it kind of suggests that it's really just sort of like 4chan trolls just kind of saying things or doing things to be edgy. Like there's this weird type of subculture, at least on 4chan, where, and in certain pockets of the internet, where it's just sort of like postmodernism in the form of like irony, where like people who are like very liberal or like very progressive will come out and they'll sort of label the other side as people who fall within extremists of the group we're referring to, and there's like a faction of people who are more moderate or just trolls that will embrace that side of it. And we saw that with the He Will Not Divide Us campaign with Shia LaBeouf, where, you know, they had people who would go to this He Will Not Divide Us camera and they would say, like, like, fuck you, insert name of faction from World War II that was defeated. And then people would show up in like the uniforms of that faction on camera. They didn't do that because they embraced the values or the rhetoric of the faction, but they did that to troll the people who were calling them that, even though they're not that. So it became like I said, it's a weird form of like postmodernism irony that people on the internet embrace, and I believe that's the most logical explanation, is that it's just people fucking around and just doing that to be edgy or because they find it humorous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. You'd have to talk to basically the founder of Yuga Labs and the creators of Yuga Labs to find out their true intentions behind it. They very well could be racist people, and you would have to do a deep dive on their background and such to find out what their true intentions are. But I do think before you cast a stone and throw people under the bus and such, you should be doing your due diligence. Shouldn't immediately destroy someone's reputation and destroy somebody's career unless you're totally certain that they support these actions.